Medellín Cartel. In the hills above Medellín, Colombia, poverty was not a condition. It was an inheritance. The city sprawled beneath the Andes in a permanent haze of smoke and ambition, its barrios packed with families who had nothing and a government that offered less. Streets that should have held schools held corners. Corners that should have held children held men with nothing to lose and nowhere to be. For most, there was no visible way out. For one man, there was cocaine. Pablo Escobar was not born a monster. He was born into the same grinding scarcity as his neighbors, and he understood something that politicians never did, that desperate people will follow whoever feeds them first. He built football pitches in the slums. He constructed housing for families the state had forgotten. He handed out money at funerals and showed up at christenings. The poor of Medellín did not see a criminal. They saw the only man who had ever noticed them. By the late 1970s, he had built more than a trafficking operation. He had built a state within a state, complete with its own economy, its own justice, and its own army. At its peak, the Medellín Cartel controlled an estimated 80% of the world's cocaine supply, shipping billions of dollars worth of product into the United States every year. Escobar's personal fortune was estimated at $30 billion. He was simultaneously building hospitals for the poor and ordering the assassination of presidential candidates. Colombia's government did not govern him. He governed Colombia. When the state finally pushed back, Escobar pushed harder. Car bombs detonated in city centers. Judges were murdered at their desks. Police officers were paid bounties per head. The country bled for years. He was killed on a Medellín rooftop in December 1993, hunted down at last, but the cocaine kept moving. It always did. The empire outlived the emperor, the Gentlemen of Cali. While Pablo Escobar waged open war against the Colombian state, bombing cities and assassinating presidential candidates, another organization watched from the shadows and took notes. The Cali Cartel did not believe in spectacle. They believed in silence, and silence, they understood, was far more powerful than noise. Founded by the Rodriguez Orejuela brothers in the valleys of southern Colombia, Cali built its empire not with car bombs but with briefcases. Lawyers, politicians, military generals, and police commanders were not threatened. They were paid. Systematically. Generously. The cartel maintained a database of every official they owned, organized with the precision of a Fortune 500 company. They did not look like criminals. They looked like businessmen because that is exactly what they chose to become. Their intelligence operation was unlike anything law enforcement had encountered. They ran wiretapping networks that monitored the phones of Colombian presidents, American DEA agents, and rival cartel leaders simultaneously. They knew what was coming before it arrived. When raids were planned, they were already gone. When informants surfaced, they were already identified. The organization did not react to threats. It anticipated them. By the early 1990s, while the world watched Escobar burn, Cali quietly expanded its cocaine networks across Europe and the United States. When Escobar fell in 1993, they inherited his infrastructure almost overnight. At their peak, the Cali Cartel controlled an estimated 90% of the world's cocaine supply. A monopoly no criminal organization before or since has matched. Their end came not through war, but through betrayal. Facing American pressure, Colombian authorities dismantled the organization in 1995. The Rodriguez Orejuela brothers surrendered, negotiating lenient sentences in exchange for cooperation. But the infrastructure they built, the roots, the contacts, the corrupted institutions, did not disappear with them. It simply changed hands. The Sinaloa Cartel. In the Sierra Madre Mountains of northwestern Mexico, there is a region so remote, so difficult to reach, that the federal government barely existed there. Roads ended without warning. Valleys dropped into nothing. The people of Sinaloa had survived for generations by growing what the land permitted. And what the land permitted, more than anything else, was the poppy. This isolation did not create poverty. It created independence. And from that independence, a different kind of empire would eventually grow. Joaquin Guzman Loera did not invent the drug trade. He inherited a system built by others and understood something his predecessors never fully grasped. Violence was expensive. Tunnels were cheaper. Bribes were cheaper still. While Colombian cartels had burned themselves to the ground through open warfare with their own governments, Guzman built quietly, horizontally, and deep underground, literally. When the Medellín and Cali cartels collapsed, the cocaine pipeline did not disappear. It simply changed hands. Mexican traffickers, who had once been paid in product to transport Colombian cocaine, now controlled the entire supply chain from jungle to street corner. Sinaloa sat at the center of this shift, absorbing the vacuum with calm, methodical expansion. El Chapo was captured twice. He escaped twice. The second time, through a mile-long tunnel fitted with lighting and a rail system, built directly beneath his prison cell. The audacity was not the point. The infrastructure was. Then came fentanyl. While the world focused on El Chapo's escapes and courtroom theatrics, Sinaloa was quietly pivoting its entire operation towards synthetic drugs. A kilogram of fentanyl, costing hundreds of dollars to produce, could be cut into millions of lethal doses. The economics were incomparable. The cocaine trade had made them powerful. Fentanyl made them something else entirely. The primary supplier of a crisis killing more Americans annually than the Vietnam War did in a decade. When El Chapo was finally extradited to the United States in 2017 and sentenced to life, the Sinaloa Cartel did not mourn. It did not fracture. It continued without him as though he had never mattered at all. That was the real achievement. Not one man's power, but a system so deeply embedded in economics, geography, and human demand that no single arrest could touch it. The mountains of Sinaloa still stand. The tunnels still run. And the cartel he built remains the largest drug trafficking organization on earth. It proved that the most enduring empires are not built on fear. They are built on systems that outlive the men who created them. Los Zetas. They were not criminals who learned to fight. They were soldiers who learned to kill, then chose to never stop. In the late 1990s, the Gulf Cartel needed enforcers unlike anything Mexico had seen. They found them inside the Mexican military itself. 31 members of the Grupo Aeromóvil de Fuerzas Especiales, the country's most elite special forces unit, simply walked away from their posts. The United States had trained many of them in counter-narcotics tactics, surveillance, and weapons. The Gulf Cartel paid them more in a week than the government paid in a year. At first, they were tools, muscle behind a larger organization, but tools with that kind of training do not stay tools for long. By the mid-2000s, Los Zetas had outgrown their employers. They split, seized territory, and built their own empire stretching across eastern Mexico. What distinguished them was not ambition. It was methodology. Where other cartels used violence to protect business, Los Zetas used violence as the business itself. Massacres were not accidents. They were messages. Mass graves were not tragedies. They were infrastructure. In August 2010, 72 migrants were executed at a ranch in San Fernando, Tamaulipas. They were not cartel members. They were not rivals. They were people passing through trying to reach the United States who had encountered the wrong men on the wrong road. In 2011, mass graves in the same municipality yielded nearly 200 bodies from passenger buses that had been stopped, emptied, and eliminated. In Monterrey, the Casino Royale was set alight with people still inside because its owners had refused to pay extortion fees. 52 people burned to death on a Thursday afternoon. The Mexican state found itself facing an enemy it had, in part, created and trained. Entire towns were emptied. Journalists were executed. The death toll climbed into the tens of thousands. Leadership after leadership was killed or captured. The organization fractured, splintered, weakened, but the blueprint remained. When a government arms men without anchoring them to something worth protecting, it does not create defenders. It creates the next threat, the Guadalajara Cartel. In the early 1980s, Mexico was not yet a narco state. It was a country with problems, with poverty, with corruption, but it had not yet been consumed. The drug trade existed, but it was fragmented, scattered. A collection of regional smugglers moving modest quantities across a border that the American appetite was making increasingly profitable. No single man controlled it. No single vision unified it. That was about to change. Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo did not look like a man who would reshape the criminal world. He was calm, methodical, and dressed like a banker. He had connections inside the government, inside the police, inside the institutions that were supposed to stop men like him. Where others used violence as a first language, Félix Gallardo used it as a last resort. His real weapon was organization. He gathered the regional smugglers, the competing factions, the independent operators, and unified them under a single structure. He forged an alliance with Colombia's Medellín Cartel, transforming Mexico from a corridor into a partner. Cocaine began flowing north in quantities the border had never seen. Billions followed. Then, in 1985, his men kidnapped DEA agent Enrique Camarena outside the American consulate in Guadalajara. What followed was not a quick execution. Camarena was tortured for 30 hours while a doctor kept him conscious. The tapes of those hours exist. American investigators who heard them did not forget them. The DEA launched Operation Leyenda, the largest investigation in the agency's history at the time, and what it uncovered went beyond one cartel. It revealed the depth to which Mexican federal institutions had been compromised. Senior officials had not merely looked away, they had participated. Felix Gallardo was arrested in 1989, but before his walls closed in, he made one final decision. He divided his territory among his lieutenants, drawing the map that would define Mexican organized crime for generations. He did not destroy his empire, he multiplied it. The Gulf Cartel. Before cocaine, before fentanyl, before the rivers of blood that would define Mexico's modern nightmare, there was a man smuggling whiskey across the Rio Grande. In the dusty border towns of Tamaulipas in the 1930s, Juan Nepomuceno Guerra built a modest criminal enterprise moving contraband liquor into a Depression-era United States hungry for escape. It was a small operation, unremarkable. No one could have imagined it would become the blueprint for a century of organized crime. As decades passed, the operation evolved with the market. The 1940s and 1950s brought contraband goods and stolen merchandise. The 1960s brought marijuana. The 1970s brought heroin. The 1980s brought cocaine flooding north through the corridors that Colombian cartels needed and Mexican smugglers controlled. Each transition was seamless, each pivot more profitable than the last. The Gulf Cartel did not survive by being the strongest. It survived by being the most adaptable, bending around. Every law enforcement crackdown, every rival, every shifting demand of the American market that fed it. At its peak, the cartel owned Tamaulipas completely. Politicians, police commanders, and military officials operated on its payroll. The border corridor into Texas was not a boundary to be crossed. It was a pipeline to be managed. Towns along the Rio Grande did not have a cartel problem. They had a cartel government. Then came the betrayal. Los Zetas, the cartel's own enforcement arm, turned on their creators and ignited one of the bloodiest internal wars in cartel history. Cities became battlegrounds. Civilians became casualties. The organization that had survived nearly a century by adapting to every external threat was nearly destroyed by the weapon it had built with its own hands. Today, the Gulf Cartel exists in fragments, weakened but unbroken, still moving product through corridors it has controlled for generations. The most dangerous criminal empires are never the loudest. They are the ones that simply never stop. The Ndrangheta. In the mountains of Calabria, the toe of Italy's boot, there is a place that the modern world seems to have forgotten. The villages are ancient, the families are older, and the silence runs deep. For centuries, this region was one of the poorest corners of Europe. Outsiders rarely came. Those who did rarely understood what they were looking at. What they were looking at was the most powerful criminal organization on earth. The Ndrangheta does not operate like the cartels of Mexico or Colombia. There are no flamboyant bosses, no wars declared on governments, no narco corridos sung in their honor. The organization is built entirely around blood. Membership is not recruited, it is born. Each clan is a family unit, self-contained and impenetrable, bound by a code of silence so absolute that law enforcement infiltration is nearly impossible. It is this invisibility that has made them untouchable. Their reach defies geography. In Australia, they control significant portions of the cocaine market through diaspora networks established across generations. In Germany, they have infiltrated the legitimate economy so completely that Italian prosecutors estimated Ndrangheta-linked businesses own hundreds of companies across the country. In Canada, in the United States, in Argentina, in the ports of Rotterdam and Antwerp, through which the majority of Europe's cocaine enters the continent, the same family clans, the same bloodlines, the same silence. While the world watched Escobar burn and El Chapo tunnel his way to legend, the Ndrangheta quietly seized control of 80% of Europe's cocaine supply. Their annual revenue is estimated to exceed $60 billion. They operate in over 40 countries, embedding themselves in legitimate business, construction, politics, and banking with a patience that spans generations. No dramatic rooftop ending, no extradition, no headlines. The most dangerous empire in the world is not the loudest one. It is the one that learned, centuries ago, that power preserved in silence lasts forever. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG. In 2010, while Mexico's security forces celebrated the fracturing of the Millennial Cartel as a victory, a man named Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes was already building something new from the wreckage. He called himself El Mencho. His organization would call itself the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Within a decade, it would become the fastest-growing criminal empire in the Western Hemisphere. And the United States Drug Enforcement Administration would name the most dangerous cartel on Earth. Mencho was not born into power. He was born into poverty in the mountains of Michoacán, picked crops as a child, and spent time in a California prison for heroin trafficking before being deported back to Mexico. He understood both worlds, the American market that drove demand and the Mexican geography that made supply possible. That dual fluency would become the cartel's foundation. Where older organizations competed for territory through negotiation and hierarchy, CJNG moved like a military campaign. It did not ask for a corridor. It seized one. Rival cartel members were not bought out or pushed aside. They were publicly executed, their bodies displayed as declarations. Videos were distributed. The message was never subtle. Resistance was not merely futile, it was fatal, and it would be recorded. In April 2015, CJNG gunmen ambushed a federal police convoy in Jalisco state, killing 15 officers. The group became synonymous with territorial conquest, open warfare against rivals, and the rapid expansion of fentanyl and methamphetamine trafficking into the United States. They shot down a military helicopter with a rocket-propelled grenade in broad daylight. These were not the acts of a criminal organization evading the state. They were the acts of an organization telling the state exactly where it stood. The DEA estimates CJNG operated in at least 25 Mexican states and established distribution networks across the United States, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Its fentanyl and methamphetamine pipelines made it the dominant supplier to American cities from Los Angeles to New York. Meanwhile, the walls slowly closed around El Mencho's inner circle. His son, Ruben, known as El Menchito, was sentenced to life in prison in March 2025 after being convicted in the United States on drug and weapons charges. His wife had been arrested on money laundering charges. His brothers were captured. His son-in-law was taken in California. The family was being dismantled piece by piece. El Mencho himself remained free, barely, and by increasingly narrow margins. On February 22, 2026, acting on intelligence linked to a close associate, Mexican Special Forces, backed by the National Guard and military aircraft, sealed off a mountain town called Tapalpa in the western state of Jalisco before dawn. Cartel gunmen opened fire as soldiers advanced. El Mencho and members of his inner circle fled to a nearby wooded cabin complex, where a second firefight erupted. Soldiers found him wounded alongside 2 bodyguards. He was 59 years old. He died while being flown to Mexico City. The cartel's response was immediate and ferocious. More than 250 roadblocks were erected across 20 Mexican states. Cars burned. Guadalajara, the capital of Jalisco, became a ghost town as civilians sheltered inside. Airlines canceled flights to Puerto Vallarta and beyond, leaving tourists stranded. 25 members of Mexico's National Guard were killed in the violence that followed. The organization did not mourn quietly. It raged. As of the days following his death, unconfirmed reports emerged that El Mencho's stepson, Juan Carlos Valencia Gonzalez, who runs the elite group within the CJNG, had assumed control, presenting a unique challenge for American authorities. As he was born in the United States, the infrastructure, the roots, the corrupted networks, none of it died with him. History had written this ending before. Escobar on a Medellín rooftop, El Chapo in a courtroom in New York, and now El Mencho, wounded in the mountains of Jalisco, dying in the air above the country he had terrorized for 15 years. The man was gone. The cartel was not. It never is.